The Pennsylvania man accused of decapitating his own father and holding his head up in a YouTube video, he's on trial right now, and the details that are coming out in court are particularly gruesome and disturbing. And the man, who has openly admitted to committing the atrocity, took the stand in his own defense. We're combing through the new information and taking a look at the consequences that Justin Mohn could face. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Okay, so before we jump into this, I'm going to be speaking with Matt Mangino in a second, and this was all recorded before the verdict came down in the Mohn case. And you're going to hear us talk about what we've seen so far in the trial, and then I'll give you an update on the verdict. We are learning chilling new details about a bizarre and brutal crime that we first told you about more than a year ago. In January of 2024, remember this guy, Justin Mohn, allegedly committed an unthinkable act? Authorities say he killed his father, 68-year-old Michael Mohn, inside of the family's home in Levittown, Pennsylvania, and he even allegedly posted a video showing off his father's head on his YouTube channel. Yeah, I'm sure you remember this one now. The video was up for a few hours before the platform took it down, thankfully. But the video, by the way, already had thousands of views. The video was posted with the title, Mohn's Militia, Call to Arms for American Patriots. And in the video, Mohn said his father had been a federal employee for 20 years, which Mohn believed made him a traitor. And in the video, he reportedly states, quote, "Violence is the only solution to the federal government's treason. And this is the head of Mike Mohn, a federal employee of over 20 years and my father. He is now in hell for eternity as a traitor to his country." He also allegedly claimed that Michael had resisted a citizen's arrest. Michael Mohn was a 20-year veteran engineer with the Geoenvironmental Section of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Philadelphia District. And in the video, Mohn also rambles about various conspiracy theories concerning the Biden administration, immigration and the border, fiscal policy, urban crime, the war in Ukraine. According to Bucks County prosecutors, it's believed that Mohn killed his father with a pistol and then used a kitchen knife and a machete to decapitate him in the bathroom of the home. It's pretty disgusting. So when Mohn's mother, Denise, came home on January 30th, she found the aftermath of this, the aftermath of her husband's killing. But her adult son, Justin, 32 at the time, wasn't there. According to police, they caught him about 100 miles away from the crime scene at Fort Indiantown Gap Base, where the Pennsylvania National Guard have a training center. He had apparently scaled a fence, demanded to speak with base leadership, but then he surrendered peacefully. He apparently told the officers that he'd hoped to enlist the help of the guardsmen to, quote, join forces with him. So he was charged with 13 counts, including murder in the first degree, abuse of a corpse, and terrorism. And despite what many would consider to be reprehensible beliefs and an odd take on morality, Mohn was declared legally competent to stand trial. Yeah, he opted for a bench trial, by the way, meaning the case was presented like any other, but there's no jury. It goes in front of a judge. So here it went in front of Bucks County Court Judge Stephen Core, who's going to make the decision on guilt or acquittal. Now, we have been following this story, and this is one we definitely wanted to bring to you. And you know, one of the reasons that we can do this, to really dive into these cases, is because of the amazing support that we get from our sponsors, like Upside. Now, Upside is great. It is a free app that gets you cash back when you buy daily essentials. I pump my gas, I can use Upside. I go out to lunch, I can use Upside. Maybe I get something at a convenience store, I can use Upside. And why not get cash back when I do all these things, right? This is real cash back. It's money that appears in your Upside app that you transfer right into your bank account. So once you have the free Upside app, you claim an offer for whatever you're buying in Upside. You pay as usual using a debit or credit card. You follow the steps on the app, you get paid. So to find out how much you can earn, click the link in the description to download Upside or scan the QR code on screen. But make sure to use our promo code SIDEBAR because you'll get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. Now, cameras are not allowed in Pennsylvania courtrooms, but local reporters have been updating the public on what happened behind closed doors. And so with that, let's discuss this. I want to bring in criminal defense attorney Matt Mangino. Matt, good to see you. This is a particularly disturbing case. So a lot of people talking about it.
Well, yeah, it is disturbing. The facts are just outrageous when you think about the conduct here. I'm in Western Pennsylvania. This is in Bucks County, which is suburban Philadelphia. It's generated a lot of media interest in southeastern Pennsylvania. So yeah, people are watching, and obviously what they're seeing and what they're reading about is very strange, very bizarre, and macabre, frankly.
The decision to go with a bench trial instead of a jury trial, why? You think that was a good choice?
I was trying to think, why you would want a bench trial. Okay, so obviously he's facing first-degree murder, which if he's convicted of that charge, it's life without parole. So you go in, you never come back out. And the case, the facts are not going to be very ingratiating with the jury. They're not going to say, oh, well, I could see why, he shot his father, cut his head off, put it on a video, put it in a plastic bag. No, I don't think you're going to get that. But of course, a judge is going to look at the cold, hard facts. And he's already testified in his bench trial that he shot, killed, and beheaded his father. So I'm not sure what the purpose is of going to jail, other than I'm sure the only plea offer was life without parole, conviction of first-degree murder.
Usually somebody would do that if they say, listen, this is a very legally heavy case. It's complicated law, and we don't want the jury to be confused, or we don't want the jury to be make a decision based on the emotion of the case. So we want a neutral arbitrator, we want a judge, we want somebody who's just going to, cold, hard look at it. Again, I don't know how that applies here, but that's just my interpretation.
Yeah. Well, you're right, Jesse. I mean, and a lot of times, there are appealable issues that have happened at the front end of the case. So maybe the defendant thought he had a really good suppression issue or some other issue with regard to admissibility of evidence. So you say, hey, we're going to appeal this anyway. Let's just go through a bench trial. We're going to file an appeal. That happens in instances, but here you admit that you killed your father. I guess he's suggesting to some extent it was self-defense. He pulled out a 9mm to make a citizen's arrest. His father tried to take the gun from him. He shot his father. I guess you're going to try to make that argument, but you've admitted to killing and beheading him. And, the other thing that I think is interesting is this judge asked him on the record if he wanted to move forward with an insanity defense. And he said, no, he didn't. I mean, obviously, there are some issues here. There's some delusional issues, which, may go to his competency if that can be reviewed on appeal. But this is not a difficult case to make a decision on.
I mean, according to USA Today, the defense chose not to even make an opening statement. Is that unusual, or it's like, let's wait to see what the prosecution has to say and then we'll make our statement?
I'm not an advocate of not making an opening statement. I think there's research out there, Jesse, which I'm sure you're aware of, that says that some jurors make their decision after the opening statement.
Oh, yes, they do.
And they go and try to then, support that decision they made by the evidence they hear during the course of the case. So from a legal perspective, a lawyer's perspective, I would never, under any circumstances, waive that opening statement. We'll have to see what the ultimate argument is of the defense.
So on Monday, July 7th, Denise Mohn took the stand. Let's talk about what happened in trial and testified about this horrific scene. And my heart can't go out to her more about what she came home to. So she finds this horrific scene when she gets home from work at around 7 p.m. on January 30th, 2024. And according to the Levittown Now, she testified that she found her husband, Michael, quote, crumpled on the bathroom floor and screamed for help. And when the neighbor came to her aid, he told the 911 dispatcher, he has no head. Now, according to Denise, her son had moved back to Pennsylvania to live with them from Colorado, where she believes he experienced some sort of mental breakdown, as she called it. She said he blamed the education system and the government for failures in his life, but she said that he and Michael had a normal relationship and said that they'd had lunch as a family the very day that Michael died. And prosecutors asked Denise about an incident where officers who'd been working with the FBI came to the home in September of 2023 and spoke to Mohn about some of the things he'd been posting online. According to Levittown Now, Denise testified that she didn't know a lot of the details, but said the officers had warned her son to stop posting on social media. Matt, what kind of things would he have to be posting for both local police and the FBI to get involved?
Well, he'd have to be posting threats against public officials, or, as I understand it, there was some documents that they found or writings that they found where he had targeted federal judges and other people in federal positions. So, those kind of things always get the attention of the FBI. especially when it's threats in the climate that we live in today. It's not as though you can shrug off and say, "Oh, that's just some guy who has a grudge." No, everything has to be taken seriously, and he was making at least enough of those threats that the FBI became aware of it and contacted him about what he was posting.
By the way, can you imagine what she's going through? Can you imagine what it's like hearing her testimony? I'm sure in your experience, having to comfort the victims of tragedies and horrible misfortune is one thing, but to feel what she had to go through, I can't quite grasp it.
All right, Jesse, it's really beyond anybody's comprehension. You come home, you find your husband decapitated in your home's bathroom. And then you subsequently learn that your son is responsible for it. I mean, that's a double whammy. I mean, obviously, your son had some mental health problems, but, to kill your husband and his father in such a gruesome way, then decapitate him.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what a wife and mother feels in these circumstances.
So the video that Mohn allegedly made showing his father's head in some sort of plastic wrapping, that unfortunately was shown in court. And according to reporting from Levittown Now, people in the gallery were gasping and crying. That's what the reporting indicates. And the head was found in a kitchen pot, to make matters worse. So according to the Philadelphia Inquirer, in the video, Mohn made a call to action, quote, "If there is a non-military federal employee in your family or friend group, make it your New Year's resolution to kill them." By the way, just in and of itself, if he posted a video of that without a decapitated head, without him killing anybody, could he get arrested for that? It seems like a call to arms for people to take action and murder. I mean, could he get in trouble for that?
Well, I don't know that would necessarily be a terroristic threat. I mean, there has to be that would be a charge in Pennsylvania where you threaten somebody with harm, and that person specifically feels threatened by it. I'm not sure that would amount to a terroristic threat. Could it be some sort of terrorism claim? I know that he was charged with terrorism here as well. But, making threats against public officials and calling for the death of public officials or judges could certainly fall into that realm. But as we well know, that he went way beyond that in this terrible incident.
So let's talk about some of the evidence here. So investigators, they testified about some of the forensic evidence that was collected from the scene, including a blood trail inside the home, a knife and machete in the bathtub, bloody gloves, plastic water bottles that had been seen in the YouTube video, emails that referred to Mohn's militia. They were open on Mohn's computer when police got to the crime scene. On Tuesday, July 8th, the court was told that Mohn had purchased a handgun at Johnston's Sporting Goods the day before his father died. Levittown Now reports that the store's owner testified that Mohn came in wearing business attire, seemed to ask pretty normal questions for a first-time gun owner. Surveillance video of Mohn holding the gun inside the store was played for the judge. And according to receipts, Mohn paid more than $1,300 for the gun, an optic scope, a grip, and ammunition. And according to testimony from Mohn's mother, Mohn had asked to borrow his father's car the day before the murder, saying he'd got a job interview at the mall. In reality, he was just buying a 9mm handgun. And then an interrogation video was played for the court, in which Mohn made a lot of wild statements. For example, he said he once worked for Microsoft and was owed between $15 and $30 million from the IRS for allegedly blowing the whistle on the company's tax avoidance. He also wanted to know if he could talk to the governor and said he would sometimes send, quote, random ideas to Governor Josh Shapiro. And it turns out that he didn't really stop trying to contact high-ranking officials once he was locked up, because there were letters that were addressed to the Pennsylvania Bar Association, the Russian Embassy in New York City, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, the U.S. Department of State in Washington, D.C., and the leader of the Pennsylvania National Guard were all seen in Mohn's outgoing mail from jail, according to reporting from Levittown Now. He also reportedly wrote letters to the United Nations, Donald Donald Trump, Joe Rogan, Alex Jones, Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson. So Matt, a lot to dissect here. First of all, really covering their bases. I mean, in terms of whether or not he did this and was guilty of murder, they're presenting quite a strong case unless you see some avenues. Before we talk about insanity for a second, because I want to just ask that one more time. Do you see some avenues there to say, wait a minute, there might be reasonable doubt? You know, he could be, is it totally legal for him to go buy a gun? And maybe he has some crazy messages, or, you know, how do you fight the forensic evidence? Because it seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it's straightforward. And, you know, the bottom line is, yeah, you'd like to have all that, you know, forensic evidence and all this background leading up to it, because that helps certainly substantiate your case against it. But the bottom line here is, it's not as though, you know, Justin is running from responsibility here. I mean, he's specifically said, he's testified, yeah, I shot my father and then I beheaded him, and these are the reasons why. And other than saying, hey, I did it, he tried to take my gun from me, there's really nothing to work on in terms of a defense here, you know, without, you know, the mental health issue.
And so if he had put forward a mental health defense, if he had put forward an insanity defense, would he have been successful based on some of the things we're talking about?
Well, I think this case actually, Jesse, screams out for an insanity defense. I mean, it has a lot of the indicia of someone who has some serious mental health problems. Now, the issue in Pennsylvania with regard to insanity is, did he not understand the difference between right and wrong? Did he think by shooting his father that, you know, he was ultimately protecting the ills of society, and that everything would be better after he did that and after other people killed government employees? You know, so that really brings to the forefront that question: did he understand that what he was doing was wrong? Did he think what he was doing was liberating this country from bureaucrats? And so I think that's decent footing to present an insanity defense to a jury, but he chose not to do that. The second question, Jesse, becomes is competency. I know, obviously, he was determined to be competent to go to trial, but that is something that I think would need to be looked at closely. I mean, could he aid in his own defense? And by taking the witness stand and saying, yeah, I shot my father and cut his head off to free society from bureaucrats.
Let me ask you that. If you're making a good argument that it seems his best legal defense could have been insanity. If the client is saying, I don't want to be called, and I'm not saying this is what he said, but if the client says, I don't want to be called insane, I don't want that defense, I think it's a terrible defense, could the defense attorney say, I think there's an issue of competency here, we're giving him a really good legal option, he's not accepting it? But I guess you can't always say, if a client disagrees with the defendant's legal strategy, that they're incompetent. But in this case, would you say if they're disagreeing about legal strategy, that's grounds for incompetency, or for the judge, the defense attorney to make that argument?
Well, I think it is, and here's why. And I think this is going to be an appellate issue, because here's someone who has what appears by his own statements a legitimate insanity defense. He didn't understand the difference between right and wrong. He didn't understand what the ultimate outcome of killing his father was. He thought it was going to liberate the country from bureaucrats, and called on others to do the same thing. You know, that's a legitimate insanity defense. Now, the jury may not buy it, but that is a legitimate defense. The question is, how could he be found competent to aid in his own defense if he doesn't clearly understand that insanity is the best option for him here? And he doesn't want to be, let's say, as you said, you know, tagged with the idea that he's insane. You know, that brings back to that issue. How do you aid in your own defense if you can't make logical, cogent decisions with regard to your own defense?
You make a good argument, make a really good argument. Let me just go back to these letters for a second, because I would be remiss if I didn't mention what was in one of those letters. Mohn allegedly wrote, I don't regret what I did and was aware of the consequences. I made a sober I'm not trying to laugh, but I mean, it's like literally in relation to what we're saying. I made a sober, calculated decision to attempt to overthrow the federal government. That's what goes back to the idea of mental health. Now, let's talk about this. According to reporters in the courtroom, Mohn seemed pretty confident and proud of his actions when he took the stand in his own defense. This was on Wednesday, July 9th. He spoke for around 2 hours, according to the Philadelphia Inquirer, delivering his own opening statement. Okay, Matt, before we dive into this, unusual, to say the least.
Well, yeah, it's unusual, but again, we have to put it into context. Let's think about some of the things that he talked about.
So here is what he had to say. Again, if we had cameras, it would have been something. But here's what he had to say, according to the Inquirer. Quote, "I was making a citizen's arrest on my father for the crime of treason. He resisted me. He said he was going to kill me by taking my gun, and I ultimately had to use deadly force. I know something such as a severed head could go viral, but it could also lessen the violence if a revolution did occur." And Mohn said he believed showing the head would convince people to surrender peacefully because they knew what could happen if they didn't. And Mohn claimed Michael was a trained martial artist and that he never intended to kill him but had no choice, calling it Plan B. But an apparent to-do list found in Mohn's bedroom seemingly pointed to premeditation. Philly Burbs reports that it included items like boom and slice, believed to refer to the shooting of Michael and then cutting off his head, plus the items clean up a little and change clothes. Not great. Now, Mohn reportedly testified this case should be a moment of reflection for our country before we allow the woke, radical leftist ideologies to overtake the status quo to the detriment of educated, straight, white Christian men. And one of Mohn's court-appointed defense attorneys told reporters during a break that the death penalty was no longer on the table as punishment if Mohn is convicted. Now, Matt, what do we think of these defenses? Do we want to call them defenses? Yeah. What do you make of it?
Here's one of the things, Jesse, that caught me in his testimony when he said that a revolution is not an act of violence, it's an act of love. Okay, so to me, that is being out of touch with reality. That is the idea that what I'm doing is not wrong. There's a greater good in what I'm doing. I'm shooting my father, I'm beheading him because we need to start a revolution. That's not rational, sound thinking. That's not even thinking, I believe, that lets you understand the difference between right and wrong. You don't think it's wrong because it's to a good end. And I think you can make that argument, but you can't make that argument if the court determines that he's competent, because then he has a role in the defense that he presents. So it's like a catch-22. What he's saying seems like it's insane and unhinged, but because he's competent, we can't force him to make that defense. So it's really strange. It's something that I think I would certainly want reviewed on an appellate level after this case is over.
What is his potential punishment now? Is he just looking at life in prison without the possibility of parole?
Right. The top charge is first-degree murder. And if you're convicted in Pennsylvania of first-degree murder, it's life without the possibility of parole. So yep. You go in, you never come back out.
Matt Mangino, what a case. Thank you so much for breaking it down for us. It is a disturbing one, to say the least, but I'm happy we had an opportunity to discuss what's been happening behind closed doors.
Thank you, Jesse.
Okay, so again, thanks to Matt Mangino for coming on to help break it down. And now for the verdict. As we suspected, Justin Mohn was convicted of the murder of his father by Judge Stephen Corr. And Judge Corr actually said in court that Mohn showed a complete and utter lack of remorse, and he called this a, quote, unimaginable, unfathomable crime. And he sentenced Justin Mohn to life in prison without the possibility of parole. That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.